The garage sat at the edge of a dusty road where most people only passed by when they had no other choice. It was small, with a faded metal sign that had lost half its paint over the years. The roof made a soft rattling sound whenever the wind picked up, and the wide front door never fully closed. But inside, something steady lived there, something that refused to break. She was already at work before the sun rose. The air still carried the chill of early morning, but her hands were warm from holding tools. A half-open engine lay in front of her, its parts carefully arranged like pieces of a puzzle. She didn't rush. She never rushed. Every movement was calm, controlled, and practiced. A man stood nearby, watching with doubt in his eyes. He had already been turned away from 2 other workshops. His car had stopped working days ago, and no one wanted to deal with it. "You sure you can fix this?" he asked, not hiding his hesitation. She didn't look up immediately. She tightened a bolt, wiped her hands on a cloth, and then finally met his eyes. "I'll try," she said simply. There was no pride in her voice, no attempt to impress. Just honesty. That was enough for the man to stay. People often underestimated her at first. Some walked away the moment they saw her. Others stayed, but with little faith. It didn't matter. She had grown used to that look. The quiet doubt, the unspoken question of whether she could really do the job. What they didn't understand was that she had already faced things far more difficult than a broken engine. She moved slightly, adjusting her stance. Beneath her worn trousers, hidden from easy view, were the mechanical legs she used every day. They were not smooth or polished like the expensive ones seen in advertisements. These were different, strong, a little heavy, and built with visible joints and metal pieces. She had made them herself. Not all at once, not perfectly, but piece by piece, over time. The man's car took hours. She worked without complaint, her focus never breaking. Oil stained her fingers, and sweat formed on her forehead as the day grew warmer. At one point, she paused, not out of tiredness, but to think. Her eyes studied the engine like it was speaking to her in a language only she understood. Then she made a small adjustment. A click, a turn, a careful push. "Try now," she said. The man got into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine coughed once, then came alive. Smooth, steady, fixed. His expression changed instantly. "I don't believe it," he said, stepping out. No one else could figure out. She gave a small nod. It just needed time. He paid her, thanked her more than once, and drove away. Like many others, he left with respect he hadn't walked in with. The garage grew quiet again. She stood still for a moment, listening to the fading sound of the car. Then she turned and walked toward the back of the garage. Each step made a soft mechanical sound, barely noticeable unless the place was silent like this. The back area was different from the front. It wasn't meant for customers. Old metal sheets leaned against the wall. Boxes filled with scrap parts were stacked in corners. A single workbench stood under a dim light. This was where her real work lived. She pulled a cloth off something resting on the table. Underneath it was a frame. Metal rods, joints, and curved pieces shaped carefully to match the human form. It looked incomplete, but not random. Every part had a purpose. She ran her hand over it, checking the alignment. This wasn't for any customer. This was for her. Years ago, her life had been very different. She had worked in a factory, long shifts, loud machines, and constant pressure. It was tiring, but it paid enough to survive. She never complained. She just kept going. Then one day, everything changed. A machine malfunctioned. There was no warning, no time to react. The accident happened in seconds, but its impact stayed forever. When she woke up in the hospital, the world felt quieter than it should have been. It took time before she understood why. Her legs were gone. People spoke around her. Doctors explained things. Workers from the factory came and left. Promises were made, then slowly forgotten. The factory itself shut down not long after, leaving many without jobs and her without answers. Recovery was not simple. It wasn't just about healing wounds. It was about learning how to exist again. They gave her basic prosthetic legs. They worked, but barely. They were uncomfortable, stiff, and made even simple movement exhausting. Standing for long periods felt impossible. Walking felt unnatural. Most people expected her to accept that as her new life. She didn't. Back in the garage, she picked up a tool and adjusted a joint on the metal frame. Her movements were careful, almost gentle. In the beginning, she had no idea how to build something like this. She only knew one thing. What she had wasn't enough. So she started learning. At night, after long days of work, she would sit with her old phone and watch videos. She didn't understand everything at first. Words like balance distribution, joint flexibility, and shock absorption sounded complicated, but she kept watching. Then she started collecting scrap, broken bike parts, old machine pieces, anything made of metal that could be reused. Slowly, she began experimenting. Her first attempt failed completely. The second wasn't much better. The third broke under her weight. But each failure taught her something. She learned how to shape metal more precisely, how to connect joints so they moved naturally, how to adjust angles so her body stayed balanced. Most importantly, she learned patience. Now, standing in her garage, she looked at the latest version of her design. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was better than anything she had made before. A loud horn from the road pulled her out her thoughts. Another customer. She covered the frame again and walked back to the front. The rest of the day passed like most days. Repairs, small conversations, quiet moments in between. Some customers were kind. Others were distant. A few asked questions about her legs. She answered only what she felt necessary. By evening, the sky turned orange, then slowly faded into darkness. She closed the garage door halfway, enough to signal that the day's work was done. But for her, it wasn't. She returned to the back, turned on the dim light, and uncovered the metal frame again. This time, she didn't just look at it. She sat down and began working. Hours passed without her noticing. The world outside grew silent. The only sound were the soft clink of tools and the occasional spark as metal met metal. At one point, she stopped and leaned back slightly. Her body was tired, but her mind was not. She reached down and adjusted her current prosthetic leg. It creaked slightly, a reminder of its limits. She looked back at the frame on the table. "I'll make it better," she whispered, not to anyone else, but to herself. It wasn't a wish. It was a decision. She picked up her tools again and kept going. The days grew harder, but she didn't stop. The garage felt smaller now, crowded with old parts, half-finished engines, and the growing stack of materials for her legs. Money was tight. Rent notices were pushed under the door more often, and each one made her stomach tighten. Customers were fewer. The new auto shop in town promised low prices, quick service, and fancy advertising. People liked shiny signs, not old garages filled with smells of oil and metal. She felt the change, but it didn't scare her. It only pushed her to work harder. She woke up before dawn, her hands stiff from the previous night's work. Her legs, the one she had made herself, creaked slightly as she walked to the bench. The metal frame from yesterday waited patiently, like it had grown used to her attention. She studied it carefully, making mental notes about adjustments. The joints were almost perfect, but the alignment needed slight changes. She traced a line with her finger along a rod, imagining how the leg would bend when she walked. She imagined walking without pain, without fear falling. That thought made her smile slightly. Outside, the town was quiet. The sun began to peek over the rooftops. She could hear the occasional engine starting in the distance, the hum of daily life slowly waking up. But in her garage, it was a different world. This was a world of creation, of trial and error, of stubborn determination. Her first attempt at making her new legs had failed badly. She remembered the night she tried to walk on them for the first time. The joints locked unexpectedly, and she fell forward, scraping her hands and bruising her shoulders. Pain had shot through her body, but she didn't cry. Instead, she had sat there, breathing heavily, studying what went wrong. She had learned more from that fall than from months of studying diagrams. She had learned patience, resilience, and how to accept failure as part of the process. Each day, she tested her design slowly, one movement at a time. She would adjust a joint, tighten a screw, then take a step. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it failed. Sometimes she would stumble, sit down, and think for hours. But she never gave up. Even when she was exhausted, she returned to bench, working late into the night under a dim light. Sparks flew occasionally as metal scraped metal, and the small fire extinguisher at the corner of the garage became her closest friend. She learned to respect it, just as she learned to respect every piece of metal she used. Her neighbors didn't understand. Some whispered about her, wondering why she spent so much time in that old garage. Others avoided her completely. A few were curious, peeking into cracks of the front door, but none dared ask questions. They saw a woman who had lost her legs, working tirelessly with metal scraps, and they didn't understand the strength behind those movements. She didn't care about their opinions. She cared about progress. She cared about testing each prototype until it was perfect. She wanted legs that could withstand hours of standing in a workshop, that could carry her over uneven roads, that could respond naturally to her movements. Not luxury, not beauty, but durability, freedom, and independence. She worked with whatever she could find. Old bike chains became joint supports. Motorcycle shock absorbers helped with impact. Broken fans gave her rotating parts she could reuse. Every discarded piece became a lesson, a building block. Her workbench became a landscape of ideas, failures, and hope. She would sit for hours, assembling and disassembling parts, studying how they fit together, how the angles affected movement. At one point, she added a small sensor she found in an old electronic toy. It could measure balance. Even if crudely, she attached it to the knee joint, hoping it would help her adjust weight distribution. The first test was rough. She leaned forward, and the legs swayed unexpectedly. She almost fell, but she caught herself, adjusted the sensor, and tried again. Slowly, step by step, she improved it. The leg responded better. Each day, it felt a little closer to what she imagined. Her financial struggles didn't make her work easier. Each new part she tested cost money she didn't always have. She rationed her tools carefully. Sometimes she went without lunch, or used old rags instead of new ones, just to save a few dollars. She would patch up small cuts on her hands herself, knowing she couldn't afford a doctor visit. Every bruise, every small injury became part of her story, a reminder that progress came with sacrifice. Late one night, she looked at her reflection in a small mirror hanging above the bench. Her face was smudged with grease. Her hair stuck to her forehead from sweat, but her eyes were bright, focused. She was exhausted, but alive. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to." By now, her designs were improving. The joints moved smoothly. The legs could support her weight for longer periods. She could walk longer distances without pain. Each success built her confidence, but she knew there was still more to do. The final goal was not just to walk comfortably, but to move freely, to stand tall without hesitation. She began testing more challenging movements, walking on uneven surfaces, climbing small steps, lifting objects while moving. Each new test revealed weaknesses she hadn't noticed before. Sometimes she had to tear apart sections she had been proud of just the night before. The frustration could have been overwhelming, but she welcomed it. Each problem solved brought her closer to the legs she dreamed of. One rainy evening, she took a break and looked outside. Water streamed down the metal roof, hitting puddles on the ground. She watched her reflection in a small puddle, seeing not just a woman with scars and mechanical legs, but a creator, a problem solver, a fighter. She realized that each day of struggle, each night spent bending metal and studying failures, was shaping more than just prosthetics. It was shaping her spirit. Her progress did not go unnoticed, even if few people saw it directly. A neighbor's child had watched her one day, peeking through the fence, eyes wide. He told his mother, who told another neighbor. Small whispers of curiosity began to spread. People didn't understand what she was building, but they noticed her persistence, her dedication, her refusal to give up. She welcomed the silence, the privacy. Her work needed focus, not applause. She knew the world would eventually notice, but for now, it was just her in the garage, the metal, the blueprints, and the quiet hum of determination. Then came a moment she didn't expect. A short video clip, recorded by someone passing by, showed her testing her latest prototype outside. Sparks flew as she adjusted the metal frame, her body moving with a balance that seemed impossible for someone with her injury. The clip captured the power in her movements, the careful precision, the raw determination. She had never intended for anyone to see it. It was private, personal, a step toward freedom. But in the hands of strangers, it began to travel. She didn't know yet that this small recording would change everything, that the world outside the small town would soon see what she had been building, what she had been fighting for, that her struggles, her long nights, her bruised hands, her creaking metal legs would inspire more people than she could imagine. But for now, she continued her work quietly, adjusting screws, bending metal, testing movement. Each day a battle, each step a victory. Pain and frustration were familiar companions, but so were hope and progress. She had learned that success wasn't sudden. It was earned slowly, step by step, failure by failure. And so she worked on in her small garage at the edge of the dusty road, creating legs that could carry not just her body, but her dreams. Legs that would one day take her further than she could ever walk alone. She didn't know the future yet. She didn't know who would notice her work, or when her life would change. All she knew was that she had built the courage to try, and the patience to keep going no matter what. She tightened one last bolt, wiped her hands on a rag, and took a step on the almost finished leg. It held firm. She smiled, a quiet, small smile, but it carried the weight of all she had endured. The world might not understand her yet, but she had already built something incredible, something that was hers, something no one could take away. She sat down, leaned back, and whispered again to herself, "Tomorrow, we go further." Her journey was far from over, but the first real steps toward freedom had been taken. And this time, she knew nothing could stop her. Weeks passed, and the small video clip of her testing the new legs slowly made its way through the internet. At first, it was nothing more than a few likes and shares from people who found it interesting. But then more people saw it. Engineers commented on the design, praising its simplicity and strength. Disability advocates shared it, calling her work inspiring. Slowly, the quiet mechanic in the dusty garage became known outside the town she had always called home. She didn't notice the growing attention at first. Her days were still filled with repairing engines, adjusting metal joints, and long hours under dim lights. She had learned long ago that recognition was a luxury, not a necessity. The morning she first noticed something unusual. She was repairing a truck engine that had refused to start for days. Her hands were black with grease, and her legs ached from standing on her mechanical prosthetics for hours. A sharp knock at the door startled her. She looked up and saw a sleek black car waiting outside. It was unlike anything she had seen in her small town. Its polished surface reflected the early morning sun, and the tires whispered softly against a dusty road as the driver parked. Her heart skipped a beat, though she tried not to show it. Visitors were rare, and strangers even rarer. A man stepped out. He was dressed in a simple but well-made suit. He moved with quiet confidence, holding a small leather case in one hand. There was a calmness about him, the kind of calm that only comes from having seen and achieved a lot. He didn't smile immediately, didn't announce himself loudly, but there was a presence that filled the small garage as he walked inside. Her first instinct was caution, but curiosity overcame it. She wiped her hands and straightened, ready to speak. "Good morning," he said. His voice was gentle but firm. "I'm here because someone sent me a video." He gestured to the metal frame in the corner, then looked at her legs. "I wanted to see it in person." She blinked. For a moment, she wasn't sure how to respond. The video? He meant the clip from the street? Her quiet, private moment had somehow reached someone important, though she didn't know who he really was. Still, she kept her composure. "It's nothing special," she said softly, though her hands tightened slightly around the wrench she had been holding. He shook his head. "It's very special. What you've done is remarkable. You designed something practical, durable, and innovative, and you did it all on your own." There was no judgment in his voice, no pity, only respect. That was new. Most people only looked at her legs and saw the loss. He looked at what she had built and saw the strength behind it. He set the case down on a nearby table and crouched slightly, examining the joints of her prosthetic. His eyes moved carefully over each connection, the angles, the shock-absorbing parts she had created from recycled metal. She watched him, silently curious about what he was thinking. She had never seen an engineer move with such ease, such focused attention on something so small. "May I?" he asked, pointing to the frame she had been working on. She hesitated, then nodded. He picked it up with care, turning it in his hands, studying how it moved. He asked her questions, not to judge, not to correct, but to understand. How did she calculate weight distribution? Why use this kind of joint? How did she manage to combine these materials to create something both light and strong? She answered simply, honestly, telling him about her trial and error process, the countless nights she had spent testing, the lessons she had learned from every fall and failure. The more she spoke, the more he listened. There were no interruptions, no assumptions, only focus. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Being understood, being seen for what she had achieved, not just for what she had lost. For the first time, her small garage didn't feel like the edge of the world. It felt like a place of possibility. Finally, he stood and looked at her directly. "I want to offer something. Not charity, not pity. I want to work with you. I have the resources, the lab, the engineers. We could take your design, refine it, and reach more people. Veterans, accident survivors, people who need durable prosthetics. But you would lead the design. You would stay in charge." She froze. The words were overwhelming. Offers had come before. Temporary help, short-term funding, promises she had learned not to trust. This felt different, though. He wasn't offering pity. He was offering respect, and more than that, belief in her ability. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the legs she had built, the metal frame in the corner, the countless nights of sweat and pain. She thought about the falls she had taken, the bruises, the failures, and the quiet victories that had brought her this far. Finally, she spoke. "I would only do it if it stays practical, affordable. People shouldn't have to be rich to have legs at work." He smiled. "That's exactly what I want too. You understand the real need. We won't compromise that." She nodded slowly. That was all she could manage. The thought of leaving her small garage, working with someone she barely knew, still scared her. But something inside said this was right. For the first time, the endless nights of struggle, the pain, the bruises, they were not just survival. They were preparation. He asked if he could test the design further, in a professional lab setting. She hesitated, but then agreed. She carefully demonstrated how she used the joints, how weight distribution worked, how each movement was adjusted. She walked across the garage slowly, deliberately, showing the strength and flexibility of her work. He watched intently, taking notes, asking questions only when he needed clarification. Every step she took felt like a small victory, not just for her legs, but for the recognition of her effort, her intelligence, her stubborn will. After several hours, he finally stood, satisfied. "This is more than I expected. Truly, you've solved problems most companies struggle with for years. And you did it alone." She felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't pride in the usual sense. It was acknowledgement. Someone had seen her, all of her effort, all of her struggle, and understood that it was more than just surviving. It was creating something valuable, something that mattered. Before he left, he placed a hand gently on the frame she had built. "I will return with my team. We'll refine it, but I promise you, we'll keep your vision intact. You'll lead this." She nodded again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to help people." "It will," he said. "I see that, and I see you." When he left, the garage felt empty in a new way. The quiet had returned, but it was different from before. It wasn't silence filled with doubt or struggle. It was silence filled with possibility. Her legs carried her across the floor with a new sense of confidence. She looked at the metal frame, the blueprints, and the small tools she'd been using for months. She knew that what she had built alone had already captured the attention of someone who could take it to the world. That night, she didn't sleep well. Her mind raced with thoughts about the future. Would her work be altered? Would she still have control? Could she handle the pressure? But beneath all the uncertainty, there was hope. Real hope. hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The next morning, she returned to the workbench. She adjusted the joints once again, measured angles, tested new movements. The video clip she had never meant for anyone to see had opened a door she hadn't imagined existed. And now, each step she took on her almost finished legs felt heavier with responsibility, but lighter with possibility. She knew this was just the beginning. The billionaire's arrival had changed everything, but not because he had brought money or influence. It was because he had recognized what she had already built. He saw the determination, the ingenuity, the relentless drive that had carried her through months of pain, doubt, and endless nights of work. And that recognition was powerful, more powerful than she could have expected. She stood in the quiet garage, legs steady beneath her, hands greasy from work, but sure. The engines outside hummed in the morning light. The world felt both familiar and entirely new. She smiled faintly. For the first time in a long time, she believed that her struggle might not just be hers alone, that the work she had poured herself into, piece by piece, could reach further than she had ever imagined. She picked up a small tool, bent a joint slightly, and whispered to herself, "We're just getting started." Her legs held her firmly. Her hands moved with purpose, and her mind raced with possibilities. The garage, once a place of quiet survival, was now the birthplace of something that could change lives. And she was at the center of it all. The journey that had begun with loss, struggle, and determination had found a turning point. The next steps were unknown, full of challenges she hadn't faced before. But she was ready. The quiet mechanic, who had built her new legs alone, was no longer alone in her journey. And in that moment, for the first time, she could feel the future reaching out to her, one careful, determined step at a time. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity, but not in the way she was used to. Her days no longer began and ended in quiet solitude. Instead, they were filled with meetings, tests, and the hum of a laboratory far different from her small garage. The billionaire had kept his word. A team of engineers and designers had arrived, and they treated her not as a curiosity, not as someone needing guidance, but as the expert she was. She led every discussion, explained every detail of her design, and answered questions with a calm authority that surprised even herself. The lab itself was like another world. Clean surfaces replaced the greasy floors of her garage. Precision instruments, computers, and 3D printers hummed quietly. It was a place built for perfection, yet somehow it made her feel at home. Each of her metal legs and prototypes found a new purpose here. What had once been rough, handmade pieces were now the foundation for something far larger. At first, she was nervous. The engineers were highly trained, with years of experience she had never had. They spoke in technical terms, referencing materials, tension coefficients, and microsensors. She had learned much from trial and error, but formal terminology was new. Yet, she discovered something important. Knowledge could come from different sources. Her hands-on experience, her careful observation, her countless hours of testing. All of it mattered. The first week, they ran her design through controlled tests. Balance tests, impact tests, endurance tests. She watched closely as her metal legs supported weights far heavier than her own. The engineers were impressed, but she remained focused. Each small flaw they noted, she already knew how to adjust. One sensor misread pressure on a particular joint. She suggested a slight repositioning, which immediately improved performance. Days turned into nights without her noticing. Sleep became secondary. Her mind was always running through possibilities, improvements, and adjustments. She discovered that even the smallest detail could change everything. The angle of a rod, the tension of a spring, the flexibility of a joint. Every improvement made the legs feel more alive, more responsive. They weren't just pieces of metal. They were an extension of her, a reflection of her determination and ingenuity. Word of her work began to spread outside the lab. Articles were written, engineers from other companies reached out, and organizations supporting people with disabilities expressed interest. She had never sought attention. She didn't want fame. She wanted practical, affordable legs for those who needed them. But now, through the work she had built, people were beginning to notice the importance of her vision. The billionaire returned one morning, quietly observing the lab. He watched her move between stations, checking on tests, answering questions and adjusting prototypes with meticulous care. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched. When she noticed him, she shrugged lightly. "Everything's going as planned," she said. He smiled. "I can see that. You built something extraordinary. But what's more extraordinary is how you brought everyone here to follow your lead." She nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere, focused on the latest prototype on the test platform. They had refined the metal, added lightweight titanium sections, and integrated better shock absorption. She strapped herself in and took the first steps. The sensors responded instantly. The movement was smoother, more natural than anything she had ever experienced before. She could feel each step, each shift of weight. It was more than walking. It was balance, freedom, and confidence combined. The engineers clapped quietly, but the focus remained on her. She didn't move to celebrate. She adjusted the legs further, tested them on uneven surfaces, and even carried a small weight to simulate everyday movements. Every improvement was deliberate, thoughtful, and precise. Weeks passed, and production began. Orders came from hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and people who had lost limbs in accidents. Her one small garage could not have handled this, but now a team of local workers, some with disabilities themselves, joined her to assemble and refine prosthetics. She trained them personally, teaching the techniques she had developed through years of struggle and experimentation. Each person she trained became part of her story, part of the mission to bring mobility to others. One afternoon, she received a call from a veterans organization. They wanted to try her design for their members. Her heart lifted. These were people who understood struggle, people who had lost much yet still lived with courage. She arranged a visit, bringing a few of the newest models. Watching people test the legs was emotional. Tears, smiles, laughter. For many, it was the first time they had experienced stability and freedom since losing their own mobility. It was during moments like this that she realized the impact of her work. Her legs were not just machines. They were hope. They were independence. They were a bridge between despair and possibility. And she had built them herself from scratch, from nothing but determination, ingenuity, and sheer willpower. The billionaire visited again, this time with media present. Cameras followed her as she demonstrated the prosthetics, explaining how each component worked, and showing the engineers adjusting parts in real time. She noticed a hesitation in some reporters' eyes, expecting to see a story of pity. Instead, they found inspiration. They saw a woman who had refused to give up, who had turned loss into creation, who had transformed struggle into opportunity. She spoke simply, her voice steady. "I didn't build these legs for attention. I built them because I needed them, and I wanted others to have the same chance I was denied. Losing my legs taught me patience, persistence, and problem-solving. If these legs can help others live better, then all the long nights, the mistakes, and the falls are worth it." The room was silent for a moment, then filled with applause. She didn't seek it, but she accepted it as acknowledgement of the hard work and dedication behind every detail. After the demonstration, she returned to the lab quietly. She adjusted the prototypes once more, checking the tension in the joints, testing balance under weight, and refining the small sensors. The engineers moved around her, working in tandem, asking questions, taking notes, but she led each step. For the first time, she felt not just like a survivor, not just like a mechanic, but like a creator with real influence. Evenings became moments of reflection. She would walk slowly through the lab, testing the legs one last time before the day ended. She remembered the small garage, the nights of trial and error, the cold floors, the bruises, the failures, the lonely hours. Each memory was a reminder of how far she had come. It was hard to believe that the legs she had built with scrap and determination had now reached a stage where they could change thousands of lives. One quiet night, she sat at a small desk in the corner, writing down notes for future prototypes. She wanted to improve the design further, make it lighter, more flexible, easier to repair, and even more affordable. She imagined children, factory workers, and people who had never thought they could walk again. Her legs could reach them. She wanted to keep reaching, keep building, keep improving. The billionaire stopped by quietly, watching her work. He didn't speak immediately. After a moment, he said softly, "You've created more than prosthetics. You've created independence, hope, and opportunity. People will remember this for years. She looked up, smiling faintly. I just needed legs to stand on. The rest came from wanting to keep going. He nodded. And your work is going to go even further. There are people around the world who need what you built. We'll make sure they get it. She returned to her notes, adjusting angles and measuring components. Her mind buzzed with ideas. But for the first time, the pressure felt good. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about creation, about helping others, about proving that struggle could be transformed into something extraordinary. Months later, the lab was busy with production, testing, and innovation. She moved through it all with focus and calm authority. Engineers followed her guidance. Workers relied on her expertise. People who received the prosthetics shared stories of how their lives had changed. Letters, emails, and videos arrived from all over, showing moments of first steps, regained independence, and new confidence. She watched them quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes holding back tears. She remembered the first fall she had taken in her prototype legs. She remembered the night spent bending metal, the failures, the doubts. And now, she saw those failures had led to something far greater. Her work was reaching the world. The garage she had once called home seemed like a distant memory, yet it was a foundation of everything she had built. Without those long nights, the falls, the grease, and the patience, none of this would exist. She had started with nothing but determination, and had turned it into a force that could move people, literally and figuratively. Standing in the lab one evening, testing the legs herself, she whispered to no one in particular, "We're only getting started." The legs responded perfectly, carrying her over uneven floors, supporting her fully, moving naturally. It was more than walking. It was freedom, strength, and possibility all at once. And as she adjusted a small joint, feeling the familiar click and smooth movement, she knew that this moment, the combination of her struggle, the billionaire's arrival, and her relentless effort, had changed everything. Not just for her, but for countless others who would now have a chance to walk again, to stand tall, to live with independence. Her journey, once limited to a small garage at the edge of town, had grown into something much larger. She had moved from survival to creation, from isolation to leadership, and from personal struggle to global impact. And she was just beginning. The lab lights reflected on the polished metal of her latest design, and she smiled faintly. The road ahead was long, filled with challenges, tests, and improvements, but for the first time, she felt ready for anything. She had built not just legs, but a future, and she was determined to keep building it, one careful, powerful step at a time. Months had passed since her designs had reached the lab and gained worldwide attention. The small garage at the edge of her town was now a memory, but its lessons stayed with her. Lessons of patience, resilience, and the quiet power of determination. She had come far from testing rough metal frames in isolation, and now she stood in a polished facility, surrounded by people who shared her mission. Engineers, workers, and even people who had once doubted her now looked to her for guidance. She had become more than a mechanic. She was a creator, a leader, and a source of hope. One day, she decided to visit the old factory where her life had changed forever. The factory had long been abandoned, its machines rusted and silent, a haunting reminder of the accident that had taken her legs. Standing outside the broken gates, she felt a familiar ache, not just of the memory, but the emptiness that had once defined her life. She adjusted her latest prosthetic legs, sleek, lightweight, and stronger than anything she had ever built before. Each step was steady, confident, precise. No pain, no fear, only movement and control. Walking through the empty hallways, she could see the shadows of the past. Broken machines, faded signs, and silent assembly lines filled the space. She remembered the accident vividly, the sudden noise, the chaos, the fall that had changed everything. Most people would have seen a place of loss and defeat, but she saw a place of transformation. She had rebuilt herself, and now she could rebuild opportunities for others. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the billionaire. He had come quietly, as always, observing without interrupting. He stood beside her, watching the way she moved through the abandoned factory, noting the natural balance and ease of her steps. "It's amazing," he said softly. "You've turned pain into power." This place, it tells your story even now." She nodded, not saying much. Words often fell short when facing memories like these. Instead, she gestured to the floor and began walking to the factory, demonstrating small maneuvers on the uneven surfaces. Each step felt symbolic, a journey through her past, showing that strength could grow from loss. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Engineers, apprentices, and some of the first people to receive her prosthetics were watching. Many had traveled from different cities, even different countries, to witness her demonstration. They had heard her story through articles, videos, and word of mouth. Seeing her now, walking with confidence and leading the test in a place that had once symbolized tragedy, they were inspired. She began speaking, her voice steady and calm. "This is where it all changed for me. But it doesn't have to be a place of loss. Every step I take now is proof that determination can transform struggle into something meaningful. The legs I've built are not just metal and joints. They are freedom. They are independence. They are a chance for people to live fully again." Tears filled some eyes in the audience. They saw a woman who had faced unimaginable challenges, yet had refused to be defined by them. She wasn't just walking. She was showing that hope and courage could carry a person further than fear ever could. The billionaire stepped forward, introducing her and explaining the foundation they had created together. The foundation's mission was simple but profound: to provide affordable, durable prosthetics to anyone in need. It wasn't about profit or fame. It was about giving people a chance to live freely, to walk confidently, and to regain independence. As the demonstration continued, she guided a young apprentice through the process of fitting a new prosthetic. The apprentice, who had been injured in an accident years ago, was hesitant at first. Her voice trembled, but she remembered the lessons she had learned: the careful adjustments, the patience, the repeated trials. Step by step, the apprentice walked, and with each movement, confidence grew. She smiled, and the audience clapped. The moment was powerful, but it was also quiet. It wasn't about applause or recognition. It was about real change, the tangible impact of work done with heart, persistence, and vision. She realized that the greatest reward wasn't seeing herself walk, or even seeing the billionaire's approval. It was watching others regain what she had once lost. Later, she returned to the lab, walking carefully over the polished floors, testing adjustments and small improvements. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the small garage filled with scraps, the bruises on her hands, the countless nights of trial and error, to this moment where her work was changing lives around the world. All felt surreal, yet it was real. Every failure, every fall, every sleepless night had led to this. Her mind wandered to the people who had inspired her along the way, the few neighbors who had once peeked through cracks in the garage door, curious but respectful, the early customers who had believed in her skills even when she doubted herself, the veterans and accident survivors whose stories motivated her to improve her designs. Each connection, each interaction had shaped her journey, and now, through her work, she could extend that inspiration to countless others. One evening, she took a quiet walk through the city streets, prosthetic legs moving smoothly beneath her. She noticed a child running nearby, laughing freely, unaware of limitations or fear. A man with crutches paused to watch her walk, a small smile forming on his face as he imagined the possibilities. She realized that her work had become more than technology. It was a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power to rebuild. Back at the lab, she gathered her team for a final demonstration before shipping a new batch of prosthetics. She adjusted each unit carefully, checking the tension in the joints, testing balance, and verifying durability. She spoke to the team simply but firmly. Every person who received these legs deserves reliability and independence. We can't cut corners. We can't rush. Our work changes lives. The team worked alongside her, following her guidance and learning from her experience. The engineers respected her hands-on knowledge. The apprentices respected her persistence. Together, they formed a small but powerful force, capable of reaching beyond the lab, beyond the city, beyond even the country. When the shipment was ready, she watched as the first boxes were loaded onto trucks, destined for hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and individual recipients worldwide. Each package represented more than a prosthetic. It represented freedom, opportunity, and a future restored. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her struggle had become a bridge for others. Weeks later, she visited a rehabilitation center to observe the new recipients testing the legs. Children, adults, and elderly people all walked, ran, and climbed with newfound confidence. Laughter, exclamations of surprise, and tears of joy filled the room. One young man, who had struggled to walk for years, took his first full steps without assistance. She knelt beside him, adjusting the joint slightly, and whispered, "You can do this. Keep going."